Welcome to my book review of Island, a book written by Aldous Huxley. Can you imagine an utopian society on an island that combines Western science with Eastern esoteric lifestyle? Will Farnaby, our protagonist in this story, is very cynical and he couldn't imagine anything like this, but he was shipwrecked on the island of Pala, the made-up island, and this story plays in the 60s. He couldn't imagine anything like it. So when he first arrived, he wanted to sell out the country Pala for its oil to a big company. But during his stay on the island, he got acquainted with the local inhabitants, the Palanese, who spoke English and outsmarted him like all the way, from the youngest person of the family, the boys and the girls, to the teachers, to the scientists. Everyone basically on the island is smarter than our protagonist Will Farnaby. And he had a change of heart during his stay on the island. And in the end, of course, he decides not to sell out the island, even though it's not his decision to make. Can you imagine an island like this? In the book it's explained why this would be an utopian society to live in. And I will discuss these changes, and of course it's all fiction, it's all made up, it's a novel, it's written by Aldous Huxley in the 1960s. It's a bit outdated too in some parts, I will get to that. But I think there are very interesting things going on in this book. One or the biggest difference between Pala and the rest of the world in this book is that they think the Western world looks too much to knowledge only and basically ignores lifestyle. They don't apply their knowledge to the way they live. That's what it all comes down to. But they've applied it in all the different areas of life. I think Huxley does a good job in explaining how this would work and what it would look like. So I'm going to try to sell this island to you and see if you agree with me that this is a believable utopian society. Okay, first, at one point in this book, Will Farnaby, our protagonist from the West, I think from England, or maybe America, it doesn't even matter. He's shipwrecked on the island, he's taken care of by these people, and he gets to know them, they take care of him. He visits a school at one point when he's better, and he finds out that instead of beginning with simple math problems, for instance, when teaching math, the Palanese start with ecology. And this is because they explain everything in this book. It's basically one continuous dialogue of different people with the protagonist explaining him how it all works. But in this case, they say it's because the children need to understand that everything is related to each other. So you don't have these different disciplines, or you do have these different disciplines, but there's one major task for the children to build bridges, they call it, from the one discipline to the other. So ecology is related to science, for instance, when looking at plants. So first they will train the children to look at the plants without any judgment. So this is basically like how Japanese write a haiku, I think. They write about something, they are not allowed to use any judgment or anything else other than descriptions. So nothing is beautiful, nothing arouses a feeling, it's just a basic description. The children have to draw it then they actually go into the science of it. So what are the different parts of the flower, how does it procreate, or I'm not sure how you call it in biology terms. But it's mentioned in the book that biology is like the basic of all the education for the children on Pala. But also concerning people, the children learn that there are basically different types of people, and they need to understand where these different types of people come from and why they behave like they do. For instance, there are cat people. And cat people are people who like to be by themselves. There are there's sheep people, and sheep like to be together in a herd. And they need to acknowledge this, and they need to understand why other children behave like they do. So that's one part. Another big part about parenthood and raising children on Pala is that you don't have only like two parents. You have your biological parents, but you also have 10 to even 15 other couples, so a man and a woman basically, who you can go to basically whenever you feel like as a child. So you don't feel like staying with your real parents anymore, or you're got into an argument. You can just go to one of these other parents and you can eat with them, you can even sleep there, you can stay there as long as you want. Obviously, this would be a problem if all the children would go to the parents with the least amount of rules or discipline to raise them. But they explain to Will Farnaby in this book, everyone acknowledges like this lifestyle they have on Pala. So not only knowledge, but the emphasis is on becoming a full human being. That's the goal of education, they say. A full human being and fulfilling your potential as a human being. And it's really important to acknowledge like what kind of person they are. Are they more like into strength and athletics, or are they more into intellect? And there are different types of training for all these different types of people. But these children, they can go to all of these adoptive parents, they call them. At these different parents, they all have their jobs and tasks they need to perform. So it's no playing around idly or just chilling all day. They actually have to perform tasks, and this will increase their sympathy for other types of people too, they say. Another thing what is very important is that they only have like 2 to 3 children each, and there's no policy for that, but everyone acknowledges that getting too many people will increase the need to produce more stuff, and they don't want to be a capitalistic society that only produces because they can, right? They want to keep capitalism in check. So that's what they say to Will Farnaby. Everyone's addicted to watching television. Remember this in the 60s, so everyone's addicted to watching televisions, and everyone's weak, and everyone's basically has a mental health problem. And I think they're right about that, so still to this day. Oh yeah, what was also very important is that the third child, in most cases, is not from the biological father, but it's from semen bank, basically, and not even from like other living Balinese people, but actually also deceased ones. So they had this famous painter in the book, really good painter they say, but they didn't export his paintings because they liked it too much for themselves. And one of the Balinese people, a woman in the book, got like a child of his semen after he died like a year ago or whatever. This is what they do to increase in an artificial way the intelligence of the people, or like they basically are breeding like a super race of people. That's basically it about the raising of the children and parenthood. Also, sexuality is a big part of their culture. They want to be as free as possible in a sexual sense. They do marry each other, and it seems that once you're married, then it's the same as it is for us. You'll stick together and raise the children, or raise whatever children come to you. But before that, they practice this yoga, sexual yoga, and this sounds really feministic in my view, but it could be something to that. So the boys and girls, they practice this yoga and have sex with each other, and it's not frowned upon, and the girls walk around bare-breasted in this place, and there's no rape and no groping or whatever going on. No Me Too hashtags here. They don't really describe what this sexual yoga is, but it's basically getting high on some dope and then having sex with each other. Not being in a close relationship with like just one other person. At one point, this one guy, he is about to go abroad to study, like in Europe. And Will Farnaby asks his girlfriend if she isn't afraid that he will go out with other women when he's in Europe. And she says no, because he's his own man, he can make his own choices. And then Will Farnaby turns around the question and asks him the same. And then he says no, because she's her own woman. And there's no cheating, because they don't consider it cheating if you have sex with other people. So they are really not Christian on this island. They are very into Buddhism and Shivaism. So they worship the goddess Shiva. And they do meditate. They meditate a lot. They have these rites for meditation. They like to go up hiking in the mountains for the younger people who like athletics. And after that, they have these rites and they recite the sutras and they meditate. and everyone enjoys it a lot in the book. So basically it's all about lifestyle and incorporating knowledge into the way you live more than we do in the West. Then we can have a look at our protagonist, Will Farnaby. He basically hates himself. Once he's on this island and he's taken care of by these people and he gets to know them better, he gets to know himself better too, because he sees what he has done to the people from his past, like his wife. At one point he was cheating on his wife. He decided he wanted to leave her and he told her so, and she was so upset she left. She drove in the car and she died in a car crash. And he was blaming himself for that. But when he was on the island, he understood that he really wasn't blaming himself at all. He was just pretending to blame himself. And that was like a horrible feeling. But at one time he's hypnotized by this woman, this Balinese woman. She hypnotizes him and makes him confront this truth. It's almost like psychoanalysis. Something like that, but they do not like Freud on this island either. So that's what happens to Will Farnaby. He wanted to sell out this country because they just found oil in Pala, and he wants to make a deal for one of the big oil companies. I think it's California Standard. I'm not sure if it's made up by Huxley, but that's what it's called. But he changes his mind like halfway. He also meets it's not the king, but they do have somewhat of royalty on this island, and that's called the Raja. And this Raja is still underaged. His name is Murugan, and Murugan grew up in the West, in Switzerland, and everyone in Pala thinks that it was like a big mistake to let him grow up there. Basically they were right, because he doesn't like Pala at all, and he's very influenced by his mother, the Rani. So you have the Raja and the Rani, and his mother went with him to Switzerland, and they both don't like Pala at all. So they're trying to get Bill Farnaby to make a deal with this oil company to get a neighboring country to invade them. And Pala doesn't have an army. They don't have a need for an army, they say, but they're very vulnerable because of that. And Murugan, he wants to raise an army for Pala. He wants to import Western products like automobiles, scooters. Well, they do have automobiles, but he wants to import it more. He wants to westernize it. His mother, the Rani, she thinks they have like fake spirituality on the islands. So she doesn't like these parenthood things they have going on, the adoptive parents. And she doesn't like the sexuality. Basically, she doesn't like any of the other characters in the book, the Balinese characters. But she has a very strong will, and this son of hers, Murugan, he's 17. He's very weak-willed, and he's somewhat of a coming dictator. That's what Huxley's trying to do with his character. Murugan, at one point he's discussing the dope they use to have sex. He is very condescending. He doesn't like what everyone is doing, the Balinese people. He says it's fake, it's not real, everything that happens. But then a doctor, Dr. Robert, is one of the main characters from the Balinese in this book, tries to explain to him how this dope broadens your mind and makes you think different about the things. But he doesn't get through to him. And this is very, very interesting to read in this day and time, because you have these two camps basically, the one Balinese camp who enjoys the way the Raja, the original Raja, made the country and thought of how they would live and how it became a utopian society, and they like it and they want to keep it as it is, and they think the West should take an example of them instead of the other way around. And then you have the other camp of the current Raja and the Rani, Murugan, who doesn't like Pala at all, and he's more into the also made up neighboring country, Rendang, and he knows a colonel there in the military, very powerful man in this book, who wants to invade Pala and to combine these two countries into one, to make the greater country. The Balinese try to dissuade him from doing this, but that's all they do. They don't fight him, they don't lock him up. In Pala they don't really have crime, and the only thing they can do, they think, is try to change his mind. And they try to change his mind by talking to him. But as they are talking to him, they don't get through to him, But they are getting through to Will Farnaby, so Will Farnaby realizes what kind of evil man he was, and he wants to better himself. So in this book there's this point in which you can either decide to go with Murugan to the Rani to make this deal for the oil company to take over, or you can go to an old woman who is dying and see how the death of a Balinese person goes. Like what do the people do like when someone is dying? I think it tells a lot about society, how they deal with their dying and their dead. And he obviously decides for the latter, and he becomes like basically one of them. But that's also interesting. The children are also part of this being born and dying, so they will be allowed to actually see a child being born, be brought into a world, and they also will be allowed to, this old woman for instance, to see her die. Will Farnaby at one point is discussing this with one of the Balinese children, and this child says, or ask him how many people he saw dying and being born, and he said none. Then the child said, well, how can you know anything about the world then? And there's truth to that, I think. Maybe not much, but there's some truth to that. This book, it was written in 1962. It was the last book Huxley wrote, and it's basically the counterpart to The Brave New World, the dystopian novel. It sometimes feels a bit outdated. For instance, when they talk about childbirth and the ratio of children, they think the West is becoming overpopulated, and they need to narrow down the amount of children they have, and they don't want to grow, like in the basic sense of the word, like being with more people. They just want to maintain their wealth and especially their happiness and their fulfillment in life. But I don't think this is a real problem, at least for the West anymore, because the the ratio of the number of babies being born is very low. So that's one point that felt a bit outdated. And another point was to talk about logical positivism. It was mentioned like a couple of times. I know it was like a dominant philosophical, scientific discipline back in that time, but nowadays, you don't hear anything about it anymore. Also, there was talk about Freud and the Oedipus complex, but I still think that is pretty actual to this day, even though nobody really talks about Freud and Oedipus anymore. I still think the Oedipus complex is still a dominant thought in Western society. That's how the island is constructed. Politics-wise, they don't like communism because they think communism is just socialism plus industrialism, and they don't like capitalism because they see how unhappy most people are, and especially how unhealthy mentally they are, especially when they look at Will Farnaby. Like the first child he encounters immediately says to him that he looks like sick, and not in the physical sense but mentally. There's truth to that. I think this island is a utopian society, but I don't think it's very likely that anything like this would ever exist, especially the adoptive parent thing they have going on, because you only need like one weak link, like maybe two couples, like married couples that don't take care of the children as they should, or have a bad influence on them, or decide not to take part of it, and then the society would collapse pretty fast. They assume everyone understands everything that's going on, so all the people really need to be very intelligent to go along with this. And that's also what I noticed during reading this, that all the Balinese people seem very, very intelligent. And of course they say that's because the way they were brought up, but I don't believe in that. I don't believe that people can grow into that kind of intelligence where they can explain to everyone at any point in time why they do what they do and why it's the best way they do what they do. I think it's very challenging. That's only for a few of the people, maybe like Huxley himself. But all the Balinese people were basically Huxley in this book, and they explained for all the different perspectives: children, a married couple, a woman who lost her husband, an old scientist man, a young man in his adolescence. They all explain to Will Farnaby why Pala is the best society there is. But they all have this intelligence to do so. And if they wouldn't have that, then they wouldn't be able to defend this way of living. And that's a one big if, I would say. I don't think that, well, maybe you can get that by artificial insemination, only smart people in society. But yeah, I don't think that would ever happen. So this book is an interesting thought process. I really enjoyed reading it. I would recommend it. I think I would recommend it more than Brave New World, because Brave New World, well, I think you know already what's going to happen in that before you've read it. And I think it's more challenging to be positive about a society than to be negative about it. And trying to create an island, like Huxley does, separate from the rest of the world, and being threatened by the rest of the world in a way of living is very, very interesting. I would recommend it. This was Island from Aldous Huxley.